Hi, my name's Chris Sweeney from Macquarie Bank. Can you tell me, are there Australian companies that are involved in this? You mentioned a number of international mining and other companies, some of which may or may not be Australian, but do you have any information on what Australian involvement there may be?
I do know the names of the companies that are quoted in the United Nations report, but Kim, do you know if these are any Australian companies? Anvil.
They're a subsidiary, so you need to go there down. I know BHP, when we were here last time, we met with some people from BHP in that meeting, and they were very interested in doing exploration in Congo. I don't know if they moved in, but everybody wants to find a reaction to it.
The profits to be made are extremely high. The biggest investors right now coming in are Chinese investors. And it's interesting to me that those Chinese investors are particularly banks from China. It's not an investment government to government. It's private or state banks for a profit motive are coming into Congo. And there it's completely dissociated from policy or from development. It's a purely profit-driven investment.
Lyn, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what happened when Secretary Clinton was in Goma. And we heard conflicting stories about her putting on the table the proposal that the U.S. government would fund a new hospital, as opposed to what I know very well as the Heal Africa Hospital is already doing an exemplary job in working with women who have fistula and so on. Can you tell us a behind-the-scenes peek at what happened?
I believe what happened. I give her credit for not being aware of all of the implications of the speech that was given to her. Normally when you come to an organization and you say, congratulations, you're doing a great job, you would not then go and say, and we're going to build a new hospital down the road. I think this was because in a later version of her own experience in Goma, she completely cut that out. But I think this is also significant that very often development policy is not for the interests of the recipient. It's very often political. It's for political credit back home. So obviously the Norwegians had approached the Americans to say, we would like to build a hospital in Goma. Can we do it with you? And they say, oh yes, that's great, because we can announce it at the same time as we're announcing our aid package for sexual violence. So I think that was really what happened. And when she looked at it further, she cut that out of the report. Mm-hmm. So we don't really know. The Norwegians are building a hospital. We don't know much more than that. I don't think the Americans are associated with this anymore. Mm-hmm.
Meg Pocock, how much do you feel you can achieve without some sort of government stability?
I would say nothing at all. This is the very absolute prerequisite for any development, for any return to normality, is to stop the war. Now, this war has gone on for 16 years, and all of the militarily based efforts at putting an end to the war have been stymied. They are not succeeding. At the present time, they have focused all their efforts on the FDLR. That's the political name now for the Interahamwe. The Interahamwe were the group that promoted the genocide in Rwanda, and then they fled into Congo. Now, when you look at any guerrilla group, they are very, very hard to attack with or to put an end to it with a regular army, because they always have places to hide. They run and hide. And our forest is 2,000 kilometers in every direction, so anyone who wants to hide can hide. So it's not likely that a military end to this war can be found. We have to have a political solution. And further than a political solution, I believe it has to be an economic solution. My father fought in the Second World War. His grandfather, my grandfather, fought in the First World War. And I'm sure our ancestors for centuries were fighting the French, fighting the Germans, Germans fighting the Italians. Europe was a mess for 1,000 years. But do we expect them to have a war now? I think the big thing that has changed in Europe is the economic union. There's economic interdependence. And everybody has a vested interest in peace. And even if you might not like the Germans or you might not like the French, doesn't matter, because our economic interests are so tied up together. People from Poland can come and live in England now, if they want to. Some of them get fed up and go back home again. But they are not a political threat to England. None of these immigrants are a political threat. This is what we need to achieve in the Central African region. We need to have an economic interdependence where people can profit from free trade. They can move across boundaries without being a political threat to their host country. And that is when the economy will start to revive and give people a vested interest in peace. At the present time, a young man who has grown up in Masisi, schools are closed, they've been closed for years. He has no education, he has no access to land. He has no hope of making any income. He might have seen his village destroyed in the war, and he wants revenge. And the only solution for these young men is to join a militia. We have to give long-lasting and viable solutions for livelihood for the future generation of Congo. We have to give them a future and a hope. And that will be the solution, not an armed solution. It was actually very interesting, our leader of the sexual violence program was out in a rural area at the very edge of Masisi territory that's been so tormented by the war. And he had brought medicine to a clinic on the very edge of the fighting zone. And he was called in to meet the commander of the FDLR in the next village. And he said, "Why have you brought medicines to their clinic and not to ours?" And he found them settled in a village. And after giving them some medicines, he said, that the commander said to him, "Please bring us Bibles in Kinyarwanda for our wives, because they don't speak Swahili and they don't have any Bibles." And these people are settled in villages, or they were settled in villages. Now, personally, I see no problem in that. These people settle in areas where they can make a living. But politically, it's not yet accepted. We have to make it so that people can find a living wherever they need to settle and give them a vested interest in peace. Did I answer your question? I've got a bit further. Okay.
And you touched on quite a bit of the challenges in international relations along the way as well. We'll start with Caroline and then move to the lady there.
Yes, Caroline Yarnell, Sydney Uni, but I've also volunteered with Amnesty International for many years. I'm sitting here thinking, could Amnesty International do any good here? And I'd imagine with nobody to really write to who would do anything, no stable government, there's really nothing that an organisation like Amnesty International could do. We've had a campaign, Stop Violence Against Women, that's been ongoing for the last 4 or so years, and I can't imagine, unless you know any good it's done, that it would be effective. That's my first thing. My second point is, question, sorry, not point. As regards to child soldiers, which is a different issue, Amnesty International worked with Oxfam to try and ban the sale of small arms. Mm-hmm. Now, I just wondered, it's not a solution. You need a structural change, I can see that. But as a sticking plaster, would doing something about arms sales, which is clearly what people are spending their money on, some sort of big push on stopping them getting hold of arms, help?
Absolutely. These are so closely related. You can control at the level of where does the money come from to buy the arms, and then you could also put controls at the level of where do these arms come from that are bought by these illegal resources. I think that's probably much easier because it's more tangible. When you make transfers via the internet of funds around the world, it's very hard to control. We've created this monster system that's completely out of our control. We can no longer ethically control the movement of money, but definitely from the manufacture of arms, we ought to be able to control. There, it's a question of political will, it's a question of Amnesty doing their job that they've always done so well of advocacy, raising this issue.
Thanks. Rosalind Strong from Unifem Australia.
Oh, yeah.
When Secretary Clinton has gender-based violence in the Congo on the top of her list of things that are concerning her, that's, I guess, got to be a good thing, because it seems from what one reads and knows that the level of gender-based violence in the Congo is ongoing and growing and worse than anywhere else. Now, I don't know whether it's worse than anywhere else except through what I read. So when the women there say it's not up to the Congolese to solve that, there seem to be so many steps to address it. Is it nevertheless being addressed directly, this issue of gender-based violence in the Congo?
Yes, very definitely, and it has to be. Obviously, when we get an international audience, we need to put the responsibility onto the international audience to do what they can. At the same time, we're definitely working on the basic value of women within the community. My husband was in the Senate during the transitional government in Congo, and within the Constitution of Congo that was voted in 2005, there is a clause that says that women have equal status before the law in Congo. They have an equal, they should have equal representation on all bodies that make decisions. They state within the new law on sexual violence that sexual violence will be punished by 5 years in prison, at least. That's the minimum sentence. Now, that's where the society has decided to put its norm. The norm is up here, and the practice in the community is so low, so far below that standard. We just did a study in Maniema where we're doing a program called Gender and Justice in alliance with the American Bar Association. So the American Bar Association reported on 38 cases in Maniema where they had got a conviction through the courts of a rapist. 38 cases. 2 are in prison. 2 authors of rape are still in prison. 10 files have disappeared, and the other cases are all escaped. Every single analysis ends évadé, évadé, évadé. He escaped from prison. So the question is that the whole system has fallen apart so badly that even if you repair one part, you repair another part, you repair another part, there's still one part that still needs repairing. This is not going to happen overnight. We've just got to keep on working at it. Have to keep at it. Particularly the attitudes within the community. When you think that in Maniema province, when they heard about the new law, the reaction to the new law was, women can't get married till they're 18. Well, what will they do? And habitually, girls at 13 are given in marriage by their parents to an older man in return for a dowry. Well, that can and does very often resolve itself at a level of a commercial sale. Some people even have a debt to a more powerful man and they don't have anything. They give them their daughter in return for a debt. We have young girls who were given in marriage at 13, pregnant, deliver a baby at 14 and have a total prolapse of the uterus, and they're no use now to their husband. They are completely finished. Their life is finished. So the issues of the rights and status of women in Congo is definitely something that we have to address within Congo, and we are doing so. I didn't particularly want to talk to you about what we have to do within the country, because I would like you to think more about what the international community should also be doing on the issue of stability. How can we re-establish norms and standards within our community when we're still fighting a war that's been going on for 16 years. Here the international community needs to come alongside to stop the war. But at the same time, we're doing what we can for gender and justice within the community. We're working with the leaders of the communities to compare their attitudes to what the law requires, so that people can believe that the leaders of our nation have decided this law because it's a good law and it's in our interests. Nobody's going to change if they don't believe it's in their interest. And Machiavelli told us that anyone who has power will never give up power voluntarily. So power over women has been held traditionally by the men. Are they going to give it up voluntarily? Not unless you can prove to them that it's in the interests of the community. So we're working on that too, ma'am.
Thank you. Khaleesi Anathin, International Committee of the Red Cross. Actually, my question's in a personal capacity. I wanted to ask about the International Criminal Court, because they're currently investigating the situation in Kivu and in Ituri, and I was wondering whether you thought that that would have any impact on peace negotiations, and also whether the International Criminal Court is a good and viable option to when domestic prosecutions aren't working.
Yes. We know Julienne Lusenge, who is testifying against Lubanga. And in fact, she's a very brave woman, because her whole family has been threatened. They've had to move to Kinshasa under protection from the United Nations, from MONUC. They're hidden in Kinshasa because of the threats against them. And I think just extrapolating from that, if the supporters of Lubanga are so terrified of this trial, it means it's important. And it signifies a tremendous amount for the women of Congo that the international community will proceed against Lubanga. Also, Justine Vihamba, she is preparing a case with you, I believe, for North Kivu. So the impact of these cases is significant. The fact that Bemba can be accused of war crimes for what he did in Central African Republic, it's very important. And yes, we, as a nation, we're very, very supportive of all those efforts in the International Criminal Tribunal. It sends a message, a clear message, and it gets high-profile publicity.
Lyn, thanks for your speech. My name is Sue Jackson. I'm manager of women's markets at Westpac. We have a special division that's dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs, women in business. And our head of women's markets, Lark Rima, is the president of the Global Banking Alliance for Women, which is a subsidiary of the World Bank. And we recently held a conference here for a lot of African bankers who are wishing to develop a similar division as ours and theirs. And we had someone from Raw Bank from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the International Finance Corporation is looking to support Raw Bank in supporting women entrepreneurs. A sign of a country's economic health is its participation rate of women entrepreneurs, according to the World Bank. So obviously there's some, you talk of the failed state, but obviously there's opportunities there for microfinance. I wondered what might be happening in that area.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to give you something. I love this. This is called On the Road to Empowerment. It's our microfinance program in Manyema. Now, the big programs with the World Bank, with Raw Bank, and the Germans have just created something called Profim, I believe. They are working at a little different level. When you think about the obstacles for a woman to get to a microfinance bank and get a loan, there are many steps. So we have chosen to work at the level of where the women are today, with zero capacity, not even literate, and never managed microfinance in a group. We bring them from that stage to having the basic capital that they can then present as a hypothèque. What's it? When you put this money down as A guarantee. A guarantee, sorry.
Collateral.
So that's where we would like to be working, and we have been doing this now for the past 5 years, getting women into groups, getting them literate, able to manage their money together, able to make a profit, able to maintain their capital, so that they do have the guarantee that can enter into your system. So I think both are necessary, because if you're starting at the level of people who already have something to guarantee, you're missing out probably 30% of the women of Congo. So I think both of our programs are necessary and should feed into one another. Yeah. It's definitely the way we're going. Yesterday I was severely criticized by one of the people at the meeting for saying, we want to put money into the hands of the women. He said, oh, this is reverse misogynism. Yes, it's probably, it's not at all reverse misogynism. It's a question of, if you put money into the hands of women, they are going to use it for getting their children into school, for paying for medical care, and for making sure that people are properly fed and clothed. If you give the money to the men, they will probably put a roof on their house, and they will probably start with a bicycle or a radio. But it's very different objectives for the men and the women. Women have always been the food producers. So men don't traditionally think of those issues. They're always the issues of the women. If you're going to make an impact on the economy of the village, on the health of the family, get the money into the hands of the women. Yes.
Alison Bronowski, Dr. Lusi, you haven't mentioned the African Union at all, and I'm wondering what role, if any, they can play in this problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that probably the African Union has left it up to the United Nations. We have a peacekeeping force from the United Nations. Goma is one of the places where they're based. I believe that if this is a problem that has already gone beyond the capacity of the United Nations to help, I wonder if that's one of the reasons why the African Unity Organization has not got involved. But I don't see any involvement of the African Union.
It's Ernie Friedlander here from an organization called Braebris, which is an international fraternal organization, and very dedicated to working towards harmony and understanding between people. Thank you for bringing a great awareness of the issues which the Congolese community is having. But how do you see it on a wider, broader scale? Because really one of the issues that is actually for society is what you mentioned, the power and greed and self-interest. Unless we're addressing this with paying greater attention to care and consideration for others, we're going to run around in circles.
Yeah.
So basically, how is the best way for society to address the issues, not just for Congo, but for society in general?
That's it. That's so true, and I think we have created an economic system that hides us from the reality of what our money is doing. And as I said before, I have no idea of what the solution can be. I hope that Lowy Institute will pick up this question in future sessions. How can ethical controls be put over the movement of money? We have made it so totally anonymous that our greed is satisfied without us seeing the connection. You know, when you go around the north of England, you can see the great big house on the top of the hill, and you see the mill, and you see the slums down at the bottom of the hill. It's very obvious. And when William Wilberforce and Shaftesbury were campaigning for social justice, it was very visible in front of the eyes of the world, of the people of England. You saw the injustices. Now, we have made it so that we don't see the injustices. Our money employs people in the slums of Calcutta, but we don't see them. They're so far away. And we have created this system that hides the injustice from our eyes. Now, I think people who are aware, like you, can make the link and make it clear to people that our use of money has impact on communities like Calcutta, on women like the women of Congo. It has a direct impact. We have to make this link clear. So thank you for your question. I'm just repeating what you're saying in other words, but we do need to be working on this. If we have any heart for justice, it's structural injustice that we should be tackling these days.
Richard Bronowski, look, you raised some intriguing points, especially about this metal that melts at 1,000 degrees and what it's used for. Do you know, is the Congo the only country or the most important country from which this is this is the source? There would be a way, you know, of international detection about what it's used for, which weapons companies, if only weapons companies. Talk to Lockheed Martin, not you, but this is a way it could be done. There is a paper trail. Mm-hmm. It could be followed through. Tantalite, is that the material you're talking about?
Right, yes.
I'm sorry, I know nothing about it, but it does seem to me that there are steps that could be taken to find out more about this and whether the Congo is really being absolutely ripped off, as you suggest, in this metal, yes, as so many countries are in the third world through extractive industries. I don't know one country where extractive industries have actually provided benefit to the poor people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've heard of this system that they called fingerprinting, that the minerals can be fingerprinted. I think the issue is, again, like I mentioned with King Leopold's ghost, you can provide a system for controlling one thing. In fact, you are fueling the injustice because the system is not transparent enough, particularly if the same mineral, there's a tiny bit of tantalite in Rwanda and vast reserves in Congo. And I, again, am not an expert in this, but it would not surprise me that there might well be the same couche, the same deposit. So probably they do have the same fingerprint. It would be very remarkable if just because somebody drew a line on the map, the fingerprint changes within a space of 50 kilometers. It would be very unlikely. So we have to be far more aware than just certification. There's far more involved. We have to dig deeper. We mustn't be looking for these very, very simple solutions. But I am very encouraged by the transparency certification movements in Germany, in America. This is a good move. This is people trying to tackle the issue. But what I'm saying is, let's look at it much more closely, because I think it can be exploited without achieving the aims that it was set up for.
I think we've put our speaker through the ringer for long enough. I'd like again to thank Lyn Lusi for a very revealing and thoughtful presentation. Thanks a lot.